Picture this, the year's 2006, Shakira's just released Hips Don't Lie, Twitter's just been launched, and of course, I was born. So, at a time like this, what car do you go out and buy? I mean, you want something to show off. You want something that's a bit flash. You want people to look at you down the street. They'll either think, God, he's got some money and be jealous, or they'll think you're a massive cock. Now, luckily, you were drowning in options. You could get anything you want. I mean, go over to VW. They were making a V10 diesel. Or, if you live in the land of burger and fries, go get a Dodge Viper with an 8-litre V10. And to put 8 litres into context for non-car people, well, it's about the same size as a small country, or the same size as most Americans. But why were car companies doing this at the time? Why were they all taking crazy pills and making some ridiculous cars? I mean, they were ludicrous. You could get outrageous things with stupid power and massive engines. But why? I think we should take a look back over time and see all these crazy creations that were made. And of course, talk about some of the most ridiculous ones out of the bunch. So when the millennium rolled round, there was a massive shift in car design. People had to stop making boxy 90s hatchbacks and move into something a bit more free-flowing, a bit more liney, a bit sexy. Porsche perfected this. They had the 996 911 with its beautiful shapes. I mean, at the time everyone criticised it for its horrible headlights, but nowadays people love the things. And of course, Porsche released the Cayenne. Once again, at the time, a lot of criticism. But nowadays, they're really quite cool, especially when you can get them with a big stonking V8 or even sometimes a manual transmission in a big SUV. I mean, I'm not an SUV lover, but that thing gets me going. I mean, cars like that set the benchmark for cars even today. Electric windows, electric sunshine roofs, heated seats. The list goes on. Fridges, massaging seats, night vision cameras. I mean, the early 2000s was probably the best era for cars. They revolutionised everything. They made things how they are today. But the 2000s was also a time before global warming, before people cared about the polar bears, before people wanted to have an electric vehicle. This was a time when people just wanted a big V8, lots of noise, lots of power, and a bit of fun. And that's why a lot of people think the 2000s was the best era for cars. And I'm one of those people. I think some of the cars that came out at the time were some of the best and will always be. The first car I'm going to talk about from this golden era is the E60 BMW M5. One of the best. One of the most loved Beamers there's ever been. I mean, when the actual 5 Series came out, early 2000s, people hated it. I mean, I've not heard such harsh reviews since 1939 in Germany. It was ridiculous. For some reason, everyone hated the body. The looks at the time, especially if you didn't get the M Sport, they were okay, but nowadays the thing has aged like fine wine. It's beautiful, and when you then compare it to an M Sport and then an M5, my God, they look good. But I mean, the whole looks thing goes with all BMWs. If you look back just a few years ago when they did the new M3 with its silly big long grills, everyone hated on it. People would literally go on Instagram comments and say, I hate this, make it the old ways. Now, a couple years on, they look beautiful. But back to that 5 Series though. When the thing came out, it was released with a big line of 2-litre diesels and petrols, a couple straight 6s, even a few V8s. But then the M5 had to come round. The M5's always been their flagship model, the big cruiser that it can get from Berlin to Warsaw in one tank. The big, powerful machine that everyone wanted. They started off with a straight 6, moved into the V8. But then the 2000s came around, the E60. They had to make something new. So they decided to do a 5-litre, naturally aspirated, 8,500 RPM V10 in a family saloon car, or later on, the Estate. And I'm sorry, that is the most ridiculous engine of all time. 507 horsepower, 8,500 RPM. Yeah, they are a bit blowy up if you don't look after them, But I mean, what an engine! And probably top 3 best sounds of all time. I mean, listen to this. And BMW decided to try out something a bit new and put in an automatic transmission. But not just an automatic, an SMG. A 7-speed, flappy paddle transmission. I mean, they tried out on the M3, a lot of hate, and even that SMG in the M5, so much hate because it's big and clunky and but time's moved on. Dual clutches are a normal thing in cars, and people are now getting used to seamless gear changes. But the M5's SMG, being old clunky and old and big and stupid, people are starting to get quite fond of the thing. If you were in America, you were very lucky because you managed to get the 6-speed manual transmission. I mean, a lot of people do the swaps for them, but a lot of people just keep the SMG because it shows a sign of the times. It was fun, it was slow, it was big, it was heavy. That's what people wanted. That was what the 2000s were about. Excess, power. And that's why that M5 was genuinely one of the best. I mean, since then, they've all been V8s and turbocharged. Yes, they're quicker and faster and way more efficient in every way. I mean, that V10 M5, if you got over 10 miles per gallon, you was on a good day. And that's what made people love the thing. It was brilliant. But with BMW releasing this silly V10 M5, Audi was upset too. Once again, we're rewind back the clock, you'll find Audi released the RS6. Once again, their big flagship model, twin-turbo V8, lots of power. But when BMW brought out a V10, Audi needed to match it. So what they did was go through their parts bin, now owning Lamborghini, and took a V10. But the V10 was good enough, so they turbocharged it twice. Put it into an estate car with 4-wheel drive, flappy paddles, and that thing could do over 210 miles an hour when delimited, and had 572 horsepower. So bye-bye BMW, I've got 70 horsepower more. Yes, the RS6 did weigh quite a lot, about 2.2 tons, but that engine, an absolute masterpiece. Like I said, technically derived from Lamborghini. I mean, I'm sure loads of people will debate me in the comments about if it is a Lamborghini engine or not, and I don't think we'll ever know an answer. I think one's a 5.2, one's a 5 litre, then Audi owns a bit, Lambo owns a bit, they'll mess around with the bottom end, do some tuning on it. I mean, Lamborghini never put turbochargers on those old ones, but Audi did. They turned the dials to max and made a ridiculous car. And people loved it, because it was just excess. I mean, a twin-turbo V10 estate car. What more can you ask for? And once again, following BMW, they've switched to V8s and turbos. It's just not as fun, not as characterful. No soul's there anymore. It's way quicker, but so what? People don't want speed, people want power. There's a difference. Speed is numbers, power is Then the M3 of the late 2000s, a silly high-revving V8. And Audi's rival, a silly high-revving V8 in the RS4. At the time, it wasn't about how quick the car was. It was about how much noise it made. It was about what sort of presence it had on the road. You see an RS4 or an RS6 with its silly wide flared arches and its massive engine, it's got some presence. And nowadays, they look the part, they've got the power to match, but do they have that character? Do you look at them and go, wow? Or do you look at them and go, oh, that's quick? There's a difference. I mean, in the 2000s, people were demanding these silly cars because they had money. People just wanted to have a bit of fun. It's why you had Bentleys with W12s. It's why you had V10 TDIs in the Touareg. These cars were all for bankers and wankers. People who had more money than sense. But that's what made them so good. They were outrageous. They were silly. It's a time that's never going to come back anymore. Everything's now turbocharged and trying to be as efficient as possible. That's not what people want. People want a silly car with loads of noise and power and revs. I mean, cars like those, they're never going to come back. Manufacturers don't see any point to do it. I mean, why would you? consumers don't want it, it's going to cost loads of money to make a 6-litre V12, and when you can make a turbocharged 4-cylinder make just as much power and be way more fuel efficient, why would you? I mean, petrol heads are a minority. When you drive down the road, you see 50 small crossover wannabe 4x4 SUV things, but then you see one cool car. And unfortunately, in the modern day, manufacturers prioritise money over anything else. So they'll go and make those 50 small 4x4 SUV things over the one petrol head. I could talk for hours on end about these silly cars from the 2000s. They were perfectly flawed. I mean, the pros and cons list just goes on. Big supercharged V8s in Jaguars, but then a bit blowy uppy. Loud V8s in American cars, 5 miles per gallon. I mean, moving over to Japan, the Nissan GTR R35 had a 3.8 litre V6, 2 turbochargers. What you see in most cars these days even. But that thing cost about 60 grand when it was brand new, and it wiped the floor with anything. It could do 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds, 200 miles an hour. It was reliable, sounded great, 4-wheel drive, launch control. And the thing, in a couple years' time, is going to be 20 years old. 20 years old. In my head, a 20-year-old car is it's a horse and cart. But, I don't know, maybe I'm out of the times. I mean, that thing there, a Ferrari F40, to me, that's a 20-year-old car. But reality is, that's now coming up on 40. Where has the time gone? But there are definitely 2 more cars which need to get a mention. Starting off with the Audi Q7 V12 TDI. Yes, you heard me, the Audi Q7. Audi's big SUV from the early 2000s. They still make them today, but just with a range of turbocharged diesel V6s and similar petrol engines. But just in time for the financial crisis of 2008, Audi decided, what we need is a V12 powered by diesel with 2 turbochargers. Ignore that accent, it turns out more, Azerbaijani than anything. But that Q7 was a ridiculous thing. How much torque did it have? Go on, take a guess. Yes, that's right, 1,000 Newton meters. Enough to pull a house down. Enough to pull a skyscraper down. I mean, there was genuine promotion ads when the thing pulled planes. No, not a little light aircraft, a Boeing 747. I mean, it had 500 horsepower and massaging seats, aircon seats, electric blinds, sunshine roof, rear heated seats, Bose sound system. I've not got enough fingers to count the features those things had. But yeah, like I mentioned, they did come out in 2008, the financial crisis, where the only people who would be buying those cars and actually had the money to afford it were jumping off of their bank tower buildings because they'd just lost all their money. I mean, most people at the time were buying 1-litre hatchbacks and eating food from rations. So why Audi made this stupid thing, no one will know. I mean, at the time, diesel sounded like a good idea. They were winning in Le Mans, and a lot of family cars had it. You'd find TDI Polos everywhere, like the one I've got. But yeah, looking back in time, I don't think that the V12 TDI is going to catch on, considering it was the first, probably the last, and the only production V12 TDI ever made. I mean, that car is the most outrageous car ever made. Well, it would be, unless there was one other thing that didn't exist. The Bugatti Veyron. Oh, the Veyron. The most incredible car, full stop. Volkswagen bought out Bugatti in the late 90s. They decided they wanted to make something that was the best, that had everything that beat everything else. So what they made was a 1,000 horsepower, 4-wheel drive, 16-cylinder, quad turbo monster. Everyone knows the Bugatti name, and nowadays they're still making Chirons and Centinadad, however you say that. But the Veyron was Genesis. I mean, they did the EB110 back in the 90s and had made loads of race cars before that. But the Veyron was when things really took a step up. With millions and millions and billions of pounds to be spent, Volkswagen went mental. They made a car which had 10 radiators. I mean, that's more than it's in my house. And yes, that is a joke that's stolen from Jeremy Clarkson to anyone who realised.
It's got more radiators than my house.
But the Veyron was literally the ultimate car. There was no beating it. It had the highest top speed when it came out at 253 miles an hour. It could do 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It had an extra key to turn up the power and increase the top speed. It had a dial to tell you how much brake horsepower was being made. What other car does that? I mean, yes, Hyundais today do that. But in 2005, 20 years ago, that was the dog's gonads, the bollocks, the cojones. That thing was peak car. You can't beat a Veyron. That was Top Trump's masterpiece. If you was fighting your mate in a Top Trumps game, you give him the Veyron, he's finished. No matter what he's got. He may have a Koenigsegg. Yeah, they're cool and a bit scary, but a Veyron's better. A Veyron's peak. And I will fight anyone in the comments who tells me otherwise. So, what I'm getting at with all of this, all this yapping about 2000s cars which interest me, is that they were peak car. They were absurd, they were obscene, they had all the power you could want. But because of emissions and because people are trying to save Antarctica from melting and keep the polar bears alive, they'll never be seen again. It's easier to make a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged car. I mean, take the C63. They got rid of a V8. The whole point you buy a C63 is to replace it with a 4-cylinder. Yes, it's faster, more efficient, lighter, easier to make, cheaper. But you buy a Mercedes E60, C63, whatever, because it's got a big silly V8, not because it's got a 4-cylinder. And I think that's what car manufacturers are missing these days. A bit of spice, a bit of excitement. But unfortunately, that'll never be seen again. And not too soon we'll be driving hybrids, all of us. So what I say to any of you, instead of going to finance a new BMW, why not take a look back through the years and go get something with a big silly engine that puts a smile on your face. Anyway, I'll fight anyone in the comments that disagrees with me as always, and I'll see you in the next one.